Hier ist die neue Folge der Ökonomie-Videos.
All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about something we handle every single day, money. But where did it actually come from? Well, get ready, because that story you learned back in school, it might just be a complete myth. I mean, you know the story, right? We've all heard it. Before there were coins, before there was cash, it was all about barter. You know, the baker needs meat, the butcher needs bread, they swap. It sounds so simple, so logical, almost too perfect. But what if that's not how it went down at all? Okay, so let's just quickly run through that classic story, the one from all the textbooks. It's this really clean, step-by-step progression. You start with simple barter, but that's a hassle, right? So then you get commodity money, things like salt or cattle. From there, it's a short hop to shiny metals, which leads to standardized coins, and boom, you've got the cash and bank money we have today. It's such a neat story, and it's got some serious intellectual heavy hitters behind it, from Aristotle all the way up to Adam Smith. And this right here, this quote from Smith, it really hits the nail on the head. He called it the double coincidence of wants. Think about it. It means that for a trade to work, I don't just have to find someone who has what I want. They also have to want what I have at the exact same time. It sounds like a total nightmare, doesn't it? And money? Well, money looks like the genius solution to that whole problem. But, and this is the big but, here's the catch. Adam Smith never actually saw any of this. He wasn't a historian documenting what happened. He was a philosopher, and he was basically just guessing. He thought, well, logically, this is how it must have happened. It was a thought experiment, a really compelling story for sure, but at the end of the day, it was just that, a story. And you know, when you start to really poke at that story, it gets a little shaky. Like it assumes people in these tight-knit communities are trading like total strangers. Come on, in a small village where everybody knows everybody, wouldn't you just keep a tab? You'd say, hey, spot me some bread, I'll get you back next week. The story just totally ignores trust, gifts, and basic credit. And here's another thing. How did they all agree on prices before money? Like how many fish is a spear worth? And if money was such a no-brainer, why did it take us thousands of years to get around to inventing it? So, okay, the logic is a bit wobbly, but what about the hard evidence? This is where the whole thing really falls apart. Let's do something fun. Let's actually look at the specific examples that Adam Smith himself used to back up his theory. All right, example number 1. Smith points to Homer's Iliad. There's this part where one suit of armor is valued at 9 oxen and another one at 100. The claim is, see, cattle were being used as money to buy stuff. But what's really happening in the story? Well, these two heroes are on a battlefield, about to fight, when they realize their granddads were pals. So they don't fight. They exchange armor as this huge, symbolic gesture of friendship. It's poetry, you know? It's not a transaction in an ancient Walmart. Okay, next up, salt in Ethiopia. This sounds like a textbook case of commodity money, doesn't it? But get this. Archaeologists have found that Ethiopia was already using actual coins based on Roman designs way back in the 3rd century AD. The whole using salt as money thing, that happened much, much later. And it was only because there was a shortage of coins. So the story has it completely backwards. The coins came first, then the salt. And the hits just keep on coming. Let's look at his next example. Dried cod in Newfoundland. Smith says the fishermen used cod as money. But just stop and think about that for a second. A fisherman spends all day catching cod so he can sell his cod to get paid in cod? It makes absolutely no sense. The reality was a lot more familiar. It was a credit system. The fishermen would sell their catch to merchants for, actual British pounds. But since there wasn't a lot of physical cash around, the merchants just gave them credit at the company store. It was basically an IOU. His last big example was right in his own backyard, in Scotland. He pointed to a village where a nail factory paid its workers in nails. But again, this wasn't some new kind of money popping up out of nowhere. It's a much simpler story. The factory owner just didn't have enough coins to pay his workers. It was a cash flow problem. So he paid them with the only thing he had an abundance of, nails. Think of it like a paycheck advance or getting paid in company scrip. The nails were just a placeholder for the real money they were owed. So, okay, we've just seen that every single one of Adam Smith's own examples doesn't actually hold up. The whole barter story is looking less like history and more like a fairy tale. So, if not barter, then what? What does the real evidence, the stuff dug out of the ground, actually tell us? And this is maybe the single most powerful piece of evidence. Take a look at this timeline. The first coins ever, they show up around 700 BCE in a place called Lydia. But look at this. We have clay tablets from ancient Mesopotamia that are meticulous records of debts. And these tablets are from 3500 BCE. That's almost 3,000 years before the first coin was ever struck. The record of debt is literally thousands of years older than physical money.
And that leads us to a really mind-bending idea. The first money. It wasn't a thing you could hold in your hand. It wasn't a shell or a lump of gold. It was an idea. It was an entry in a ledger. It was a record of a promise, a social obligation. In other words, the first money was debt.
And once you start thinking about money as credit, so many other weird historical facts just click. They suddenly make sense. For example, why were the very first coins worth so much? We're talking values so high you couldn't possibly use them for daily shopping. And why did some of the biggest trading peoples in history, like the Phoenicians, get by for centuries without ever making coins? The credit theory explains all of that. It even explains paper money. I mean, if money has always been just an IOU, a promise, then shifting from a promise on a clay tablet to a promise on a piece of paper, well, that's not such a radical jump, is it?
Okay, so you might be thinking, this is a cool history lesson and all, but so what? Why does any of this matter now? And that's a fair question. It matters because this isn't just about the past. The story you believe about where money comes from has huge implications for how you see the world today, especially how you see the economy and what you think the government's job is.
Just look at how this plays out. On the one hand, you have the classical view. If you think money just popped up naturally from barter to make life easier for traders, then you probably see money as this neutral thing. It's just a veil, and the government should pretty much stay out of it. But on the other hand, there's this heterodox view. If you think money started as debt, a social agreement, often overseen by a government or a temple, then money isn't neutral at all. It's a political tool. It's a social creation, and the government has always been right in the middle of it.
So, to wrap this part up, the bottom line here is what economists like L. Randall Wray have been arguing for years. When you go looking for the evidence, the proof for that classic barter story, it's just not there. Anthropologists have never found a single society that actually ran on barter. And there's no real proof that the first coins got their value just from the metal inside them. The whole foundation of that story we all learned, it really seems to be a myth.
And that really is the thought I want to leave you with. We've just taken a look at one of the most basic, fundamental stories in all of economics and seen that it's probably not true. So if that simple story about money, something we all thought we understood, is actually a myth, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else are we taking for granted? What other bedrock ideas that shape our entire world should we be taking a much, much closer look at?